California is trying to slaughter its golden goose, and the goose is already flying south for the winter.
That might be the single most expensive migration pattern in the history of the United States.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're covering a story today that honestly feels like fiction, but I promise you every word of this is real.
It's pretty wild.
We're recording this on January 29, 2026. And if you've been watching the news out of Sacramento, you know that California is, well, it's tearing itself apart.
It really is. It's a full-blown civil war inside the state government.
So let's set the scene for everyone, because the timeline here is absolutely crucial. There's this massive fight happening over a new ballot initiative. It's called the 2026 Billionaire Tax Act.
Right.
And normally, these things are just noise until Election Day, but this one has already triggered an earthquake.
It has. The vote isn't until November, but the panic is happening right now, and it's all because of the fine print.
The proposal wants to take a 5% cut of the net worth of anyone with over $1 billion in assets.
Yeah.
But here's the kicker, and this is why we're talking about it today.
Mm-hmm.
It applies to anyone who is living in California as of January 1, 2026.
Which was, what, 4 weeks ago?
So the trap is already snapped shut.
That was the intention, yes.
And the result,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the smartest money in the room saw this coming a mile away. We're already seeing confirmed reports that at least half a dozen billionaires, including Larry Page, the co-founder of Google,
Right.
moved their assets or completely fled the state before New Year's Day.
It's just wild. You have the people who literally built the modern economy of California packing their bags in, like the middle of the night.
And they aren't just taking their suitcases with them.
Oh, no. They're taking their businesses, their family offices, their foundations, and most importantly, their future tax payments with them.
This brings us to the most fascinating political twist I've seen in years. You have Governor Gavin Newsom. Now, usually, Newsom is the poster child for progressive policies.
Absolutely.
But he is openly fighting this tax. He's on record calling it fool's gold.
Newsom is looking at a spreadsheet that terrifies him. He knows that if this passes, it might plug a hole for 1 year, but it will bankrupt the state in the long run.
Let's dig into that, because the public sector unions, specifically the SEIU, are pushing this as the only way to save the budget. They claim they need this money to save health care.
Yeah.
But Newsom is out there sounding like a conservative economist.
He really is, and it's because this is a high-stakes game of chicken. The state is chasing a one-time payout of, roughly $100 billion?
It sounds like a fortune.
It is a fortune, but the price of getting that money is driving away the very people who pay a huge chunk of the state's annual taxes.
It's like they're burning down the house to stay warm for one night.
That is exactly what's happening.
Okay, I want to pause here and really unpack the mechanics of this tax, because I think a lot of listeners hear billionaire tax and think, well, they have the money, let them pay. Or they confuse it with income tax. But looking at these sources, this is something totally different.
This is the critical distinction. Income tax is a slice of what you earn in a year. Your paycheck, maybe you sell some stock and make a profit, the government takes a cut. We're all used to that.
Right. You make money, you pay the coal.
But this proposal is a tax on wealth. That means the value of everything you own. Your house, your car, your retirement accounts, your business.
So assets minus debt equals net worth. And they want 5% of that number. Is that every year or just once?
This specific proposal is a one-time 5% hit on net worth for anyone over that $1 billion mark.
Okay, 5%. If I have $1 billion, that's $50 million. It sounds like a lot, but maybe manageable if I have that kind of cash. But here is where the sources start shouting about unrealized gains. Explain that to me like I'm in 8th grade.
Unrealized gains is just a fancy term for paper wealth. Let's say you start a company. You pour your life into it. You own stock in that company, and it becomes incredibly successful. The stock market says your shares are worth, say, $10 billion.
Okay, so I'm worth $10 billion on paper.
On paper. But you haven't sold the stock. You don't have $10 billion sitting in your checking account. You have a piece of paper that says you own a business.
So I'm rich, but I can't buy groceries with that stock unless I sell it first.
Exactly. Now, the state of California comes along and says, congratulations on your $10 billion company. You owe us 5% of that value. That's $500 million. Cash. payable immediately.
But I don't have $500 million in cash. My money is tied up in the company.
So what do? You have to sell the stock. You are literally forced to sell off a piece of your own company just to pay the tax bill.
That sounds like a nightmare for a business owner. You could lose control of your own company.
You absolutely could. If you have to sell 5% of your company this year, and then maybe next year they do it again, eventually you don't own the majority anymore.
And this explains why the business groups are calling this a job killer. It's not just about losing money. It's about losing the ability to run the company you built.
It penalizes success. I mean, think about the message that sends. If you build something massive, if you create thousands of jobs and change the world, the government steps in and seizes a chunk of your equity before you've even cashed out.
So why are they doing this? Surely the people writing this law understand how stocks work. What's the motive?
Well, the main sponsor is the SEI United Healthcare Workers West. And they're looking at a very specific problem. There's a $19 billion hole in healthcare funding.
That's a big hole.
It is. The sources mention federal cuts, something called H.R. 1 or OBBB, that reduce subsidies. So the union looks at that gap, then they look at all the wealth in Silicon Valley.
And they see a piggy bank. So because the government can't manage its own budget, and because federal funding got cut, the solution is to just seize assets from a list of about 200 private citizens.
That is the reality. It's a desperate cash grab. And the conservative critique here, and frankly the critique from any economist looking at the long term, is that this is a spending problem, not a revenue problem.
I mean, California has one of the highest budgets in the world.
Massive, and yet they always seem to need more. So instead of fixing the inefficiency, instead of managing the budget better, they are targeting a tiny group of people, literally 200 taxpayers, and trying to extract this massive windfall.
And the problem with targeting 200 people is that they can fit on a couple of Gulfstream jets and leave.
And that brings us right back to the Exodus.
Let's talk about that January 1st date again, this snapshot tax. It feels incredibly aggressive. It's retroactive. Like, if you were here on New Year's Day, we own a piece of you.
It's practically a trap. And that aggression is exactly what triggered the panic. If the law had said, this applies to anyone living here in November when the vote happens, people might have waited. They might have spent money campaigning against it.
But by making it January 1st.
They forced the hand of every wealthy person in the state. The billionaires looked at the calendar in December 2025. They saw the ballot initiative gaining signatures, and they said, we have to go now.
And we're not talking about small players. Larry Page moving his business entities out of California. That is a seismic shift.
It is. Larry Page, Sergey Brin, Peter Thiel, these are the people who created the innovation economy. When Larry Page leaves, he doesn't just take his checkbook. He moves the entire infrastructure of his wealth.
What do you mean by infrastructure?
It means his family office, the people who manage his money. It means his philanthropic foundations. It means his investment vehicles. Those are jobs. Those are office leases. That's economic activity that is now happening in Miami or Austin instead of Palo Alto.
And this, what Governor Newsom is freaking out about. I really want to highlight his argument because it is fascinating to hear a Democrat say this. He calls it bad economics.
Newsom is looking at the backfire effect. Here is a stat that it blows my mind. The top 1% of earners in California pay almost half of all the income tax in the state.
Half.
California's budget is incredibly top-heavy. It relies on these, 200 or so people to fund the schools, the roads, the police. The state is addicted to their capital gains.
So if you chase those people away to get a one-time wealth tax,
you lose their income tax forever. Larry Page pays millions, maybe tens of millions in California taxes every single year. If he becomes a resident of Florida, that number goes to zero.
So to get a one-time check for $100 billion, the state is going to lose billions of dollars every single year for the next 20 years.
That's the math. The Legislative Analyst's Office, these are the nonpartisan number crunchers, they ran the numbers, and they predicted a likely ongoing decrease in state revenues. They are essentially telling the voters, yes, you get a pile of cash today, but you are destroying your revenue stream for the future.
It's like selling your car to pay for gas. Great, you have gas money, but now you can't get to work.
That is the perfect analogy. And Newsom knows that California isn't the only game in town anymore. He's looking at Texas, he's looking at Florida. Those states have zero state income tax.
Zero.
Zero wealth tax. And California has the highest taxes in the nation. Newsom is warning that this initiative puts a giant closed for business sign on the Golden Gate Bridge. He knows capital goes where it's treated well, and right now, California is treating capital like an enemy.
And the California Chamber of Commerce is jumping in on this too, right? They're calling it a job killer.
They're looking at the next generation. If you're a 25-year-old genius and you're about to build the next big AI company, why would you do it in San Francisco? You know that if you succeed, the state is going to come for 5% of your company.
You'd go to Austin? You go to Miami?
You would go anywhere else. It destroys the incentive to build there.
But the unions, the SEIU, they aren't buying that argument, are they? It seems like they think this is all a bluff.
They're in total denial. They're calling the threats of leaving overstated. Their argument is basically, oh, California's too nice, the weather's too good, they won't really leave.
That feels like a very dangerous gamble when the moving trucks are literally on the highway.
It's a profound misunderstanding of how wealth works. When you have that kind of money, you can buy nice weather anywhere. You can have a house in Hawaii and a house in the south of France. You don't need to pay 13% income tax plus a wealth tax just to see the ocean.
It really highlights this major rift in the Democratic Party right now. You've got the business wing, like Newsom, who realizes you can't tax people into prosperity, and then you have the populist wing that's willing to risk the entire economy just to punish the rich.
It is class warfare, plain and simple. But in this war, the enemy can just leave the battlefield.
Okay, so let's look at the practical side of this. Let's say the voters approve this in November. How does the state even collect this money? I mean, how do they know what a private business is worth?
That is the administrative nightmare. If you own stock in Apple, we know the price. It's on the ticker. But what if you own a private space exploration company? What if you own a chain of grocery stores that isn't public?
Who decides the value?
The government. The state would have to hire an army of auditors. We're talking about tens of millions of dollars a year just in administrative costs. They have to go in, look at your books, and decide what your company is worth.
That just sounds like it ends up in court instantly.
For decades. You can imagine the lawsuits. My company's worth $2 billion. No, our auditor says it's worth $5 billion. It becomes this endless, subjective fight.
And what if the value changes? That's the volatility risk the sources talk about.
Oh, this is huge. Most billionaire wealth is in stock. If the market crashes, let's say we hit a recession and tech stocks drop 40%, that projected $100 billion revenue just evaporates.
But the billionaires have already left.
Exactly. The damage is done. The taxpayers are gone. But the revenue you were counting on never shows up because the market tanked. So the state gets nothing, but they've lost their best revenue sources permanently.
It really sounds like a lose-lose situation.
It's a classic example of unintended consequences. You design a policy to grab cash, but you completely ignore human behavior.
I want to touch on something that I think a lot of regular people worry about. The slippery slope. Right now, they say this is only for people with $1 billion. That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Most of us will never see that. So why should the average listener care?
Because history shows us that these taxes never, ever stay at the top.
Give me an example.
Look at the federal income tax. When it was introduced in 1913, do you know who it applied to?
I'm assuming just the super rich.
Only the top 1%. It was sold to the public as a tax on the robber barons. They said, don't worry, the average worker will never pay this.
And now look at our pay stubs.
Exactly. Once the government builds the machinery, once they hire the auditors, write the code, and build the department to tax wealth, it is very, very easy to lower the threshold. Today, it's $1 billion. Tomorrow, they have another budget hole, and they drop it to $50 million.
Then eventually.
Eventually, they come after the equity in your home. They come after your 401k. Once that door is open, anyone can be pushed through it.
That is a terrifying thought. The idea that the government claims ownership of your savings.
And remember, if the billionaires leave, the state still needs money. If Larry Page isn't paying for the schools and the roads anymore, who do you think picks up the tab?
The middle class.
Always. When the tax base at the top crumbles, the burden falls on everyone else. The state isn't going to just stop spending money. They'll just raise taxes on the people who can't afford to move to Nevada.
So to wrap this up, California is attempting a high-stakes gamble. They're trying to seize $100 billion from about 200 people. But the result seems to be that the targets are leaving, taking their businesses and their annual tax payments with them.
And the tragic irony is that the people this is supposed to help, the people relying on state services, are the ones who will suffer the most when the budget finally collapses.
Right. If you're listening to this and thinking, I'm not a billionaire, this doesn't affect me, you really need to think again. When the rich leave, the tax base crumbles. That means less money for schools, for roads, for police. And it inevitably leads to higher taxes for the middle class to fill that void.
There is no such thing as free money. Someone always pays. And usually, it's the person who can't afford to move.
I want to leave you with one final thought to chew on. California has always been the land of the dreamers. The gold rush, Hollywood, Silicon Valley. It's always been about coming here to make it big. But if California's most successful innovators, the people who actually built Silicon Valley, are now fleeing the state to protect their life's work, what does that tell us about the future of the American dream in California? Is the state officially over?
That is the question every voter there needs to ask themselves before November.
Thanks for diving deep with us. Keep your eyes on your wallet.